Hey there, ever stop and think about how we all manage to connect, do business, and share huge ideas when there are literally thousands of different languages out there? Today we're going to talk about the incredible idea of the universal bridge, the tools we've created to get around our very own Tower of Babel.
I mean, it's a huge question, right? There are almost 7,000 languages spoken on this planet. So how does a scientist in Japan work with a researcher in Brazil? How does a pilot from Egypt talk to air traffic control in Germany? Well, the answer is actually way more fascinating than you might think.
The solution has a name. It's called a lingua franca. It's basically a common language that acts as a bridge, letting people who grew up speaking different things communicate with each other. It's not about replacing anyone's language, not at all. It's about connecting them. Think of it like a shared key that unlocks a global conversation.
Now, when we think of a global bridge language today, one example just towers above all the others. So let's dive into the undisputed, reigning champion of modern lingua francas, English.
Check out this number, 1.14 billion. Now that's not the total number of people who speak English. Oh no, that's the estimated number of people who speak it as a second language. And that massive scale is exactly what makes English a global phenomenon. It also tells you something really surprising about who really owns the language.
And this chart, this is what really tells the story. For every one native English speaker, there are almost 3 people who speak it as a second language. This right here is the ultimate sign of a true lingua franca. Its real power doesn't come from the people who are born with it, but from the billions who choose to adopt it as their bridge to the rest of the world.
And you see this bridge, like, everywhere. In the boardrooms of international business, in the cockpit where pilots have to talk to control towers all over the world, it's in scientific research papers, and it's in the very code that makes the internet work. English has basically become the default operating system for global communication.
So, how does a language get to be this powerful? It's definitely not an accident. There's actually a pretty clear pattern of historical forces that can lift one language up to become a global bridge. Let's break down the anatomy of how these things actually get built.
For English, its rise was kind of like a 3-act play. First, it started with the incredible colonial reach of the British Empire, spreading the language all over the globe. Then, after World War II, it got supercharged by America's huge economic and cultural influence. And finally, it was basically locked in by the digital revolution, which was born and raised in the English-speaking world.
So what this shows us is a kind of blueprint that applies to any bridge language, not just English. They pop up to help different groups talk to each other, often for a specific reason, like trade or science. And here's where it gets really interesting. They don't always have to grow naturally over centuries. Sometimes they can be built from scratch.
And this brings us to a really cool distinction. These bridge languages basically fall into 2 camps. The natural ones that just sort of evolve organically over time, and the constructed ones that are intentionally designed by people. Let's look at one of each. Okay, this table lays out the difference perfectly. On one side, you've got Swahili, which grew naturally out of trade on the East African coast. And on the other, you have Esperanto, which was literally designed by one person who had this incredible goal of creating world peace with a simple, neutral language.
Let's talk about Swahili for a second. It is such a powerhouse example of a natural lingua franca. It was born over centuries of trade between Bantu-speaking people and traders from places like Arabia and Persia. And today, it's this vital bridge for culture and business for over 200 million people across a huge, really diverse part of Africa.
And then on the flip side, you've got Esperanto. It was created back in 1887, and its goal wasn't power or money, it was peace. The whole language was engineered to be super easy to learn, with regular grammar, using words from European languages. The hope was it would create this neutral ground for everyone to communicate on.
You know, this whole idea of a bridge language, it is not a modern thing. Not at all. History is absolutely full of examples of languages that rose up to connect empires, traders, and scholars. This isn't just about English, it's a deeply human story.
In fact, get this, the name lingua franca itself, it comes from the original one, a language called Sabir. It was what's called a pidgin, just a simplified mix of Italian, French, Spanish, and a bunch of other languages that sailors and merchants used for centuries all around the busy Mediterranean Sea. It was the original bridge.
And way before that, of course, there was Latin. Even long after the Roman Empire was gone, Latin was the undisputed lingua franca for Europe's entire intellectual world. If you were a scholar, a diplomat, or a priest anywhere from Lisbon to Warsaw, you were doing it in Latin.
And this timeline just snaps it all into focus, right? From Aramaic in the ancient Near East to Latin in Europe, Sabirano on the seas, and now English on a global scale. The need for a bridge language has been a constant throughout history. A language rises, serves its purpose, and eventually it makes way for the next one.
And this isn't just ancient history. Even today, underneath the global layer of English, there are so many important regional lingua francas doing their job. Russian still connects many of the former Soviet states. We've talked about Swahili uniting East Africa, and Urdu is a key connecting language in Pakistan. This is a living, breathing thing that's happening right now.
And when you boil it all down, this is really what it's all about. A lingua franca is so much more than just a tool for business or science. It's a key that can turn a world of disconnected strangers into a single global conversation, letting ideas and, well, empathy cross any border.
And that leaves us with one last really fascinating question to think about. History shows us that no lingua franca stays on top forever. So, as global power continues to shift and as new tech like real-time AI translation gets better and better, what do you think is going to be the next universal bridge for all of us?